Paula Collins is looking for the Democratic nod in the 21st Congressional District as a special election is coming. We know it's coming, but Paula Collins is a name that you'll remember from the last election when she ran against Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, with Stefanik being upgraded or promoted, I would say, to President-elect Trump's cabinet and being the UN ambassador. There's a race coming. So long introduction, but good to see you. Thank you for joining us here at our 7 News Digital News Desk.
Thank you for inviting me.
So round two for you in terms of running for this seat. You have the interest. Some people may not know you. So give us a little bit of your background, where you're from and what you do and what kind of interest you have here in the 21st.
Well, I live in DeKalb Junction, which is right up the road from here in St. Lawrence County. I am a cannabis tax attorney and also do bankruptcy work. And I decided to run, it was about this time last year that I was putting my hat in the ring for the general election, and it was because I really believed in democratic values and wanted to make sure that there was a Democratic challenger on the ticket.
And how long have you been in the North Country?
I've been in the North Country for about a year and a half now. That's a funny question because as an attorney, especially in one of our state's newest industries, I'm traveling constantly. And so how long have I had an actual rented permanent place? About a year and a half. But how long have I been doing work and meeting with clients, helping to build small businesses, really since during the pandemic?
So you're looking to represent the region in the 21st Congressional District, 15 different counties, huge district, 15,000 square miles, right? Let's talk about both sides before we talk about your platform and why you're running. Give me how this works, because the people don't decide, right? It's going to be up to the chairman or chairperson of each county to come up with a decision as to who's going to be there for the Democrats, who's going to be there for the Republicans, right?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question because it is confusing. A lot of people have called me and have said, gee, why don't you call Kathy Hochul and get her to appoint you? It does not work that way. The way that it works is that each party will have their party leaders, which in this case would be the 15 chairs of each county, although some of the counties have co-chairs, so that adds another person in some instances. So they're meeting together. They asked each of us to submit a letter of intent and a resume, and then to begin a conversation with them about what assets do we bring to the ticket? What is our plan for fundraising? What is our plan for ground game? And how is it and why is it that we think that we are the best nominee for the ballot?
On the Republican side, we've heard some names of people that are interested: Anthony Cosentino, Dan Steck, the state senator, maybe even over on the Watertown side, Matt Doheny, who has run in the past. But in your own party, not a lot of names have been named so strongly, I guess. I mean, it's not as clear, I think, as to some people that are running. What other names do you know on your side of the ticket, Democrats, that are going to be running in this race? Who's your competition, I guess?
Well, I think early on, Steve Holden had expressed an interest in running. I know that Blake Gendabine, who's a farmer up in St. Lawrence County, he's expressed interest and has been out there aggressively fundraising. There have been a few other names. Knut Sauer, who is on a town committee and town chair in Essex County, I believe it is. And I knew Knut from when I was campaigning. And so right around Jay and Wilmington area. So those are just a few of the names. There was somebody from the Ogdensburg area. There were a teacher from, I think, either Franklin or Essex County. So there were a lot of us who expressed interest. A few of the counties, specifically Fulton County and Washington County, had holiday events or mixers where we could go and talk to voters, but we weren't to really campaign. In other words, we weren't giving stump speeches. We were just mingling and talking to voters. What I'm doing, I'll speak for myself, is I'm talking to voters about what's important to them. The election feels very different than the election we just had in November because there is that razor-thin margin in Congress. What we saw was that even though the Republicans do have the majority in both houses, they really need at least some Democrats in order to legislate, and they need their votes are not locked down necessarily. We saw that with the speaker vote. So there is still a lot of need to place a Democrat in the House of Representatives who could lead with, I call it smart, strong, and bold leadership.
When it comes to the district itself in a special election, it's going to happen so quickly. Once it's called by the governor, then it's going to be 70 or 80 days after that. You don't have a lot of time to get your name out there. Is that one reason why you think that you're the Democrat to be on the ticket, is because you did run in the last election and your name is recognizable by voters?
Exactly. And in fact, as I was going around campaigning for the general election, so many of the voters said, please stick around. Please let us see your name. Please let us see your signs. You know, it is such a huge district, and it's not like there are large population centers like there would be in some other congressional districts. So it just takes a while to get your name out, to get people to feel comfortable with you. So for that reason, I think that I am the best choice for the Democrats. In fact, a lot of voters still have my signs in their garages. So, and you know, that's also why I announced my bid for 2026 the day after the election. That was a promise I had made to my voters, and I fulfilled that promise by registering right away.
In fact, I think you made the promise on our air on election night to our reporter. You said that you weren't going anywhere and that you were going to be back. Little
Exactly.
did you know that you were going to be back this quickly. So you have to go and you have to meet the voters. You have to have campaign money as well. You got to have people that support you. Where are you with coming out of the last election, because maybe you had some money left over in your campaign, and how is it going so far with raising more money? Because your name is out there, you're there, and people can donate to your campaign.
My name is out there, I'm there, but you know, I don't think that we're meant to use our voters as ATM machines. I don't think that it should be, hello, I'm Paula, give me money to run for Congress. What I'm doing right now I have hired actually my first choice of teams, fundraising teams, that they weren't available during the general election. I was so thrilled to contact them, and they were tremendously on board. So we're building a machine. We're building our processes. I can't even say that we're building. We've got processes locked down once this nomination comes through. But right now, you know, a lot of voters are confused. A lot of voters are hurting on the Democratic side. And so a lot of what I'm doing, honestly, is calling voters and saying, hi, I'm checking in. What do you think is important? What do you think Democrats need to message? I was, you know, when I was going door to door during the general election, people would say the economy, and I would talk about tax credits. And now I know that I want to talk about how is it, and show people how is it that Democrats put food on the table, gas in the car, and keep a roof over heads. Because that's what's really weighing down a lot of people. The average American is very distressed over those three issues, especially housing, but the cost of groceries, the cost of gasoline. So they have a lot to talk about, and I want to call them, I want to connect with them. I am calling them and connecting with them and getting them to talk about what they need, what do they think needs to shift a little bit. We're in really a different place than we were in November, because we're seeing some of first of all, Elon Musk was not as much of a presence. He hadn't sort of moved in. He does plan to have an office in the White House. He hadn't had such a prominent role in Congress, to which he was never on the ballot anywhere. And so how is it that we deal with that? We heard Joe Biden last night talk about, we have these really wealthy people who have a lot of influence over our politics. And I think that the average voter in New York 21 is going to kind of be nervous about that.
Back to the campaign finance, money into the campaign. You'll need money. I mean, that's clear. You're going to have, as the Republican side is likely going to want to hold on to that seat. Oftentimes, the money can come from the national party, right, from the DNC.
Absolutely.
Have you had conversations at that level yet, and are they supporting you?
Well, of course, it would not be proper for them to support me at this point before I am the nominee. I'm aware that the state level party is in conversation. I've been told by the county chairs. Actually, what they've messaged to us is that they are in contact with their state partners and their national partners about how to finance this election. But it really would not be proper for them to contact me when I'm not the only person seeking the nomination.
It's this region's congressional district, but do you think it'll gain national attention, the special election?
Absolutely, because the margins are so close. And
In Washington.
In Washington. And so any Democrat that can be put into Congress is going to give us, a little more edge. And when I talked about how the Republicans need as many votes as they can, so they're going to aggressively seek this seat, as well as the Democrats are going to want to cling to any kind of ground that they can get.
As you talk to voters and you talk about putting gas in the car, food on the table, a roof overhead, what's the answer to that? We have high inflation. We have, housing is a problem in terms of having to be affordable. What are your answers to that? It's good to identify the problem, but then you want to have the answers. And what do you tell people when you're out there campaigning? What are your answers to those?
Well, the Trump agenda is to lower corporate taxes. And I like to remind voters that in an era when we, say, built the interstate highway system or put a man on the moon, our corporate tax rate was more than double what it is now. And so I believe it would be a mistake to lower the corporate tax rate. And I believe, furthermore, that we could improve the lives of everyday Americans if we would raise that corporate tax rate even by 3 to 5 percentage points so that we could afford to help out everyday Americans. The other thing, speaking of corporations, that we need to look at is in an era when gas prices have gone sky high, it's not like the corporate executives of the oil companies are hurting. They're still getting bonuses. They're still getting top executive salaries. For that matter, their shareholders are still reaping a lot of wealth. And so don't we need to look at that as a nation? Don't we need to let's also look at our food supply. Increasingly, our food supply is managed by 4 or 5 grocery suppliers, and that was why the Justice Department pushed back on a recent grocery merger, because we want to make sure that everyday Americans have the opportunity to have lower costs at the grocery store. If all of that control is in the hands of a few corporations, then the average American doesn't really stand a chance. Housing, Kamala Harris wanted to build 3 million new homes and wanted to also support with assistance for first-time home buyers. We still need to do that. We still need to address the issues of housing. New York 21, as far as climate change, dealt with devastating floods, which then took out some of the inventory that was already very low for housing. And then you look across the country at poor LA, and they're going to have some serious, serious housing issues. Thank God we don't have that level of devastation here.
When we talk about the district and who represents the area in Congress, it has been a Republican for a while. The area votes Republican. So I have a couple of questions on that. First, is it, as a Democrat going into it, and sort of seeing in your last election with the results of that, is it an uphill battle for a Democrat to run in the 21st Congressional District?
Oh, of course, without a doubt. Without a doubt, it is an uphill battle. But that does not make it a gimme. That doesn't mean that there isn't a path forward for a Democrat, especially by reaching out to those blank voters or those moderate Republicans or even some of the MAGA Republicans who are looking at what is going on even so far in Congress, in the 119th Congress, that is already starting to pass some agenda. They want to legislate, how is it that people work from home? How is that compensation credited to annuities and to retirement plans? That sounds like big government to me. That sounds like government really overreaching into that employer-employee relationship. I don't think that's what the MAGA voters even wanted.
When you have, looking back at the election in November, do you think that the fact that, I mean, many people were surprised at the outcome and how it all played out. That could have kept Democrats home in the 21st. Do you think the results of that and seeing what's happening now could play in your favor?
I do. And, you know, we're all still studying the data. We're all still looking at which districts or, you know, which little neighborhoods voted which way. Was there a shift from 2020 to 2024? And the other, you know, big piece that we're studying is how is it that the change in those district lines impacted New York 21? What is it, you know, we have a bigger disparity of registered Republicans versus registered Democrats since those new lines were drawn. And so how is it that we counter that? How is it that we message so that we can reach out to some of those registered Republicans?
Who do you look to for advice in running for Congress in the 21st? You have former Congressman Bill Owens. If you've had any conversations with him, he represented the area back when the lines were differently drawn, and he even now admits that it's tougher for a Democrat to win in the 21st because of that. And then, have you had any conversations with Tedra Cobb? She ran a couple of times.
I have had some really productive conversations with Tedra Cobb, and Tedra is getting really involved in some grassroots organizations up in St. Lawrence County.
Is she running in this?
She is not.
Okay.
No. But, you know, as you say, when Bill Owens ran and won, first of all, his first run, it was New York 23, and then the lines were redrawn, and he was reelected to Congress, but as New York 21, and that was before MAGA. And so I think that there isn't a person on either side of the aisle who would argue with the idea that MAGA has really changed the landscape. MAGA has really changed the dynamics, and so it's difficult for us to imagine messaging the same way that we would have done in 2009 when Bill Owens first ran. What is similar to this particular moment is that the Republicans seem to have some very strong personalities that are wanting to be on the ballot. And so what we don't know is, will that split their vote? Whereas if the Democrats can present a unified front, will that help us get some of that edge? Nobody knows. The other thing is voter turnout. Do we know how many people are going to really turn out for a special election? We don't know.
Do you think it could be a lot? I'm seeing it as it was a race back in November that many people just thought it would go Republican, and the results kind of can back that up. But in this one, you would have two new people, right? You have someone fresh on the Republican side. You have somebody that's going to be on the Democratic side. And do you see it as kind of like a fresh start in that race, and you're both starting at the same starting point? Do you get what I mean?
I do. There are pros and cons. I mean, if I had to make a list of how is it that it's a new race and how is it that it's really, for the Democrats, just another chapter in that same race. And there are pros and cons. So it's a complicated question.
As we're getting down to the wire and the campaign will begin, I guess my final question is, what are the important things that you tell voters in terms of, if you are that person to run on the ballot as a Democrat, what is it that you'll do for people? What is your message to the voters?
So my message is, Democrats help people, help everyday Americans to put food on the table, gas in the car, and keep a roof over heads. There is often the question about, will I collaborate or will I resist? And it's a balance, right? Because of course I'll be working across the aisle to pass legislation that is for the benefit of all voters in New York 21, regardless of who they voted for or how they align. There will be some times when I will push back and I will really cling to our democratic values and our democratic principles. I will always fight to preserve Social Security. I will always fight to preserve veterans' health benefits because, especially in this part of the country, that affects a whole lot of people. I will always fight to preserve Medicare. I would love to see us have Medicare for all and would like to work in that direction. We want to make sure that those prescription drug prices remain capped because that is going to give a lot of extra change, a lot of extra cash in the pockets of people who need it the most, such as insulin users and so forth. So my message is that I am the candidate who is really, really invested in helping the average everyday person, not the billionaires, not the millionaires, the average earner.
One last question about the border. I guess we can't let a conversation go by without something about the border because of, clearly we're right by it, but there's been strong talk from the Republicans, from President-elect Trump, from the border czar, incoming border czar Tom Homan, who sat right in that chair and answered questions. Do you agree with the stance that's coming from the Trump administration and how we have to get tougher on the northern border as well? You probably have had conversations with people regarding that border and the problems that are there.
I have, and the border is a big concern, especially the further north that you go from Watertown. It gets to be more and more of a top issue for voters. Look, I don't want us to see us bring criminals into our country. I don't want us to see troublemakers or people who come in and just kind of laze around and try to get any benefits. I don't want that at all. But what I do know is that the small businesses, the small hotels, the small restaurants, the family-owned businesses, the family-owned farms in the North Country really rely on those workers even to come in seasonally. So what we need is a process so that somebody could come in, make themselves known, get a temporary work visa so that they could immediately get work and could start paying their payroll taxes, could start paying into the towns and counties that desperately need that revenue. And so there is a win-win that we can find. And I do believe that this is an issue, as we saw with the bipartisan bill that was in the Senate, that the Republicans ultimately defeated. There is a way forward that answers all of the concerns. You know, part of that bill was also an increase in security and in enforcement at the border and allowing for more judges at the border because, as we know, people can come over, they can declare asylum, and yet it can take months or years for them to even have a hearing. That's not fair to anybody involved in the process. And so what we want to do is find our voices that represent what the needs of the citizens are in New York 21 that can also be amplified at the national level and then codified at the national level.
Paula Collins, thank you for the
Thank you.
conversation. We appreciate it very much.